Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. If you can see us and you can hear us and you can let us know in the chat, that would be fantastic. I always like to do just a little tech check before we get everything going. Oh, awesome. Okay, I can see and hear you. Fantastic. Well, I am going to go ahead and get us started today right on time because we have a lot of great information to get through. If anybody comes in after the fact, totally fine. They can join in right where we are about to take off. But my name is Katie Lyon. I am a part of the Furnished Finder team, and I am a midterm rental host myself. So I am here today to introduce you to Jeff Hurst, who is our CEO. And we're going to talk all about the monthly rental surge and some data that we have for 2025 and all things midterm or monthly furnished rental. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff. Just a couple housekeeping notes really quick before we get going. The chat, I will keep it open as long as, it does not become a problem or too cumbersome. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. We should have time for live Q&A at the end of this. So please put that in the chat. I will go ahead and mark it as a question, and hopefully we will have time to get to your specific question at the end. And as well, this webinar will be sent out on a recording. So if there's something where you're like, I didn't get that, I want to see that slide again, I want to dive deeper, don't worry, you will get an email after our session today with the full recording for you to access. All right, Jeff, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Katie, and really appreciate everybody being here. I can see we've already got almost 300 people who have joined up. I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your enthusiasm for the category and for you being a customer. And for today, I'm going to take you through quite a bit of data and things we're seeing in the industry. And my only ask of you is to be curious and ask questions. I expect it'll probably take me 30-ish minutes to kind of get through the presentation and what we've been up to and what we've learned. And that should leave, at least 20 minutes for a Q&A. And so please use the chat, and Katie will help us moderate as we get through it. For those of you that I haven't met before, I'm Jeff. I am our CEO and president here at Furnished Finder. I've been here almost a year and a half, and so I am no longer get to use the excuse of I'm new and I'll find out. And I'm really enjoying getting to meet everyone and also enjoying our ability to improve and help serve everybody. A bit about myself. I really spent most of my career in the short-term rental space. And so I joined HomeAway in 2010 as a director of strategy. I stayed with the company and was the chief strategy officer when we sold to Expedia Group, stayed on and was a general manager and led the sales team for several years. Became the president of Vrbo in 2019 and was later the chief operating officer at Expedia Group. I left Expedia Group and took some time off and joined Furnished Finder. I met the founders and was really excited for their vision and how much it reminded me of kind of a simpler time and short-term rentals, notably the annual subscription model and really encouraging landlords and tenants to just talk and figure it out. And so we are far along in building out kind of the next evolution of that platform. And I'm excited to share with you today where we are. Personally, I have a 13-year-old son who keeps me busy and increasingly feeling old on the basketball court. 15-year-old daughter. My wife is a practicing acupuncturist. And also we have 3 short-term rentals. We kind of built our portfolio while I was at Vrbo, and so I know a lot about managing those properties. And since taking this job, have actually started outsourcing the management and use property managers now. We're in the market for a monthly rental, and hopefully I'll have more to share on that the next time that we chat. All right, moving right along, this is what we're going to cover today. So the agenda is going to bit on market trends. And also what we're learning about our tenant groups and the people who are guests in your homes. Going to talk about the top markets in terms of supply and demand, and what we've been up to from a product experience standpoint and what we're doing next. So with that, let's talk a little bit about market trends. One of the things I'd really encourage everybody to stay in touch with is just like, how do people think about the service you offer? And so one of the things I noticed in the category was that, I I go to the Midterm Rental Summit. We were the site for midterm rentals. When you look at how people are searching for homes, people are not searching for midterm rentals. They call it monthly rentals. And so the monthly rental term is both growing and 50 times the size of the midterm rental term. Bigger than monthly rentals are both travel nurse, which remains a top tenant type for us and is fortunately starting to grow again after several years of being in decline. And the top term is actually Furnished Finder. And we're really gratified to see people starting to use that in their search behavior because it means we're building a marketplace that can create more value for you. And so, as you think about, what it says on your site or how you describe the product, I would just keep that in mind that kind of midterm rentals is a little bit of an inside baseball term, whereas monthly rentals is something that is how people are searching for it. Monthly rentals, furnished monthly rentals, that sort of thing. Another thing that we've learned in the past year is we've gotten a lot smarter about how much inventory is where and where do people shop. I will get to Airbnb. I realize they're not pictured on the page, but wanted to kind of set the overall context. And so, Furnished Finder, we have about 300,000 listings on our platform. And that is, we think, probably the biggest and most comprehensive exclusive website for monthly furnished rentals. When you look at apartments.com, and think apartments.com is owned by CoStar, they also power homes.com and several other websites. They have about 80,000 furnished monthly rentals. But what's interesting is almost all of their inventory is multifamily. Think of that as like your larger, bigger complexes, 100 units, 200 units. And so 95% of their monthly furnished inventory is actually multifamily. Zillow has about 36,000 furnished monthly rentals. And this is all you can filter on their sites and see this stuff. And about 2/3 of that is multifamily. And according to their most recent annual report and their most recent quarterly earnings, really multifamily is where they're growing the fastest. And that, smaller subset, and for them, that'd be about 10 or 15,000 homes, is what's comparable to the 300,000 homes on Furnished Finder. Now, it's harder to understand exactly what is on Airbnb. So of our inventory, we think about 1/3 is probably on Airbnb based on survey data and how people use our calendar features. And based on what Airbnb has disclosed, we know they have about 1.6 million homes in the US. We think less than 20% of their nights are from stays 30 days or more. They stopped talking about it in recent quarterly reports, so I expect it's actually probably flat to declining as a percent of the total. And we think that probably means they have between 1 and 200,000 30-day plus rentals on their site. And so out of the 1.6 million, 1 to 200,000 are probably comparable to what we offer on Furnished Finder. A really unique thing is that, some reporting AirDNA did and a little bit of commentary from Airbnb, their demand in the US is growing about 5% year on year. And so think about that as the total booked volume. Ours is growing significantly faster than that. Think more like 40 or 50% year on year. And so we're seeing more and more shoppers, tenants, choose to come to Furnished Finder so they can avoid basically paying that 10 to 15% fee, and also so they can talk directly to you. They like being able to pick up the phone. They like that you reply, that you can have the conversation, on your own terms without us standing in the middle. So that's a little bit about the competitive space. As I mentioned, demand is surging. This is from end of March. We've had over 2 million tenant inquiries on the platform. Booking requests are actually up the most, and we'll talk more about that. Keep in mind that, on the website, tenants can basically do 4 things. They can send a booking request, which is the most information they can provide you. It includes reason for travel and how many people are staying, and it's more of a form field. They can send you a direct message, which could be brief or could be expansive, and they can reveal your phone number. The 4th thing they can do is they can submit a housing request, which is the one-to-many paradigm unique to us, where they're reaching out to everyone within a geographic radius that meets their criteria. Now, booking requests are up the most because we are emphasizing it to help you get more qualified tenants, and we're really gratified at the progress we've been able to make here. Additionally, we're going to spend some time now talking about who is making all those booking requests, what's happening, who are these tenants, and how can you better serve them. So let's get right into that. This is the makeup of what we know from our booking requests. So about 35% of all people making booking requests on Furnished Finder are either traveling for work or digital nomads. Now, this is a pretty varied group, and so a ton of the demand increase we're seeing here is construction based, and we'll talk more about where they're going and what they're doing. Healthcare has been pretty stable. You know, if you've been with us for several years, healthcare used to be the largest tenant type on the site. You know, we're happy to see it kind of flat to starting to grow, but it's about 25% of the total now. The fastest growing type of occasion on our site is now relocation. And so relocation here, it could include insurance, which is a popular strategy for people using Furnish Finder, but it primarily is people who are moving to a new city or just need a new house in the existing city and they need a place to stay. I call this try before you buy a lot. It might be people who are thinking about, you know, they're moving from Seattle to Austin, they're looking at buying a home, but they're not sure what neighborhood they want to be in, or they don't want to move their furniture twice. And so they get a furnished finder for 3 months or 6 months while they sort it out. In many cases, they actually end up staying there for a longer time because it ends up being a better fit or better financially. But this is the fastest growing tenant type we have. Academia for us typically means professors and grad students. We don't really have as much on the undergrad side. And then other is other. There's, you know, all sorts of different use cases people use. One of the things we're learning more about, we're seeing more and more leisure, in particular like seasonal snowbird come to the platform. Again, because it is, you know, a very cost-effective means to go find longer stay occasions. So let's spend a little bit more time talking about the growth rates of these. And so why is relocation growing the fastest? Booking requests from people claiming relocation is the primary reason for traveler are up 130% year on year. The thing to know about this, we've got a few theories of it. I mean, I think primarily, if you're looking to move and sign something that's a, you know, our typical lease is 3 months, about ish $2,500 a month. So for $7,500, looking at paying platform fees, you're talking about maybe losing $1,000 to Airbnb or Verbo just in platform fees by booking on that site instead of ours. So we think there is growing kind of affordability crunch and people are interested in looking for ways to save money on fees. Additionally, the affordability crisis of housing has more and more people wanting to be really sure that before they buy or sign something long term, they're in the right place. And so that is getting more and more people to kind of try this 3 month model. And finally, furniture prices have gone up. We think that might subside now. Some of the tariff chaos is hopefully behind us, but people are less enthusiastic to basically go furnish a place and potentially move the furniture or move their furniture twice. And so they're choosing furnished accommodations more often. Interesting thing about relocation, it is typically more people in a larger format house. And so there are some opportunities to basically be quite unique in this space compared to that dominant occasion we have where it's more like one or two tenants and it's more likely to be the studio, the 1 bedroom, or the 2 bedroom where something's a workspace. So very exciting news here, and we've been really enthusiastic about what we've been able to do to drive more of this demand for each of you. So what has that meant for changing behavior? It's a little bit more advanced planning. And so this first stat is saying that it's 36 days on average to go from you start your search to you start your stay. And so think of that as if I'm searching today, what's the date I'm going to put in for when I want to move? That's up about 2 days from last year. Now, most of that increase is actually that people who are moving for a relocation usually have more advance notice. And so they're planning a little bit further in advance. We continue to see more and more people looking for accommodations for Fido. Almost a third of all booking requests now include pets, and that's up several points from this time last year. And finally, the length of stay has actually been remarkably durable. People typically sign on for 3 months. We still see a lot of people looking for extensions or at least extension flexibility, but the length of stay is still just over 3 months on the platform. So how many people are staying and what does that mean? And so I mentioned that relocations is up. This is actually the biggest change and it surprised me a bit. So the number of tenants per booking request has actually increased an entire person since last year. And that's a very significant change. So previously, of all the booking requests that got sent, the average tenants per request was 1.6. That's all the way up to 2.6. Now, when you look at this distribution, the majority, a lot of people think of the category as being like a traveling nurse, and so a single occasion, or a traveling corporate. That's not what the data says. The behavior is now 85% of all booking requests are two or more travelers. And so this is changing how we think about what inventory we need and where we need it. Now, still 70% of all of the stays include three tenants or less. And so that's still very, doable when you have a one bedroom apartment, maybe a convertible couch, or you have a one bedroom, or you have a studio that's got a creative sleeping situation. And so there's still a lot of opportunity for the core, but there's a lot of growth in that 4 and 5 plus tenant group. And when we think about that in the context of our overall supply base, what you see is that, go back, think about that 30% or four or more people, only 20% of our inventory is three bedrooms or more. And so thinking about neighborhoods where there are more people looking at relocations, where there is maybe more, school districts that are in demand, or a high propensity for remodels or housing stock turnover, there's really interesting strategies available to cater to that use case. And think about, there's a mom who just needs to be in the area while they remodel, or maybe there's an insurance claim, or maybe they're moving to the school district and want to get in before the year, but they're not ready to buy. This is a real community asset. And one of the things that I think has been quite great experiencing, kind of making this transition myself from short-term rentals to midterm rentals, is this housing in a neighborhood is an asset for the neighborhood. It helps families have better lives. It helps people experience and move to the neighborhood. It helps home values. It's quite the opposite of the, at least reputation that short-term rentals often have. It's a two-night party. It's a long weekend and it's going to be loud. It's transient. There's 50 different people over the course of the year. And so there's an opportunity, if you are kind of in the long-term hold space, or long-term leases, to think about how your strategy could better accommodate this higher yield moment where people are trying before they buy, or need a place to stay while they remodel. And we're really excited about the potential here. And you still see we've got a large percent of two bedroom or less, and there is a really healthy room business. And we've got over 60,000 room rentals, and think that there is going to be more and more potential for that use case to be interesting. In particular, as you think about some of those dynamics where you might have construction placements, or opportunities to see more of, you're traveling for a few months for a gig and really just need a place to crash. So let's spend a little bit of time on supply and demand markets and talk to you about what we're seeing across the nation. These are the top 10 cities on Furnished Finder as ranked by the amount of inventory in each city. So since we published this last year, a few cities have fallen out of the top 10. Denver, Houston, Albuquerque have fallen out of the top 10. New to the top 10, Atlanta is new, which we're excited to see more in the Southeast. You can see that Tampa and Miami are also new here. And so we're starting to see a little bit more of a redistribution. We used to be much more West Coast centric, and now we're starting to get more in these larger cities on the Southeast. And Austin is also new, as Houston fell out. So there's not a lot you can glean from this. It's a lot of big city names. But one of the things that's compelling for us is that we're seeing movement and some redistribution here. Now let's look at it from the demand side. Interestingly, on the demand side, none of the top 10 markets are in the Southeast yet, but now that we have better supply, we think there's a chance that we might start to close that gap. And you see more Northeast here. And so Boston shows up here, New York shows up here, Chicago in the Midwest. And so these are markets that they're so big and have so much commerce, they should be in the top 10. And so us being able to get more tenants here is hopefully a sign that we can also start to get more supply online, and more landlords willing to serve them and provide great experiences. On this side, what's new? Boston is new, New York is new, Austin is new. And what dropped out were a little bit of the Sun Belt cities, in particular, Phoenix and Albuquerque dropped out, and Nashville was in the top 10 last year and has dropped out for this year in terms of demand. So we're going to do a deep dive on a handful of these and go a bit more nuanced of what are we seeing by market type. And so we'll start with what we call the small markets. These are markets that have 1 to 500 listings. We don't do a presentation on towns and cities with less than 100 listings. There's literally tens of thousands of them, and so it's hard to draw a lot of statistical significance about what's going on. But when you look at 100 to 500 listings, a couple things pop up. One thing that's interesting, Abilene came out of nowhere and is now #1 on underserved areas. And so I'll save the spoiler alert there, but for anybody who's got a theory, feel free to post it in the comments as to what is happening in Abilene. Of the other smaller markets, Juneau was really interesting. And we have a Landlord Diary podcast coming out on this soon that talks through a bit of these in each more detail. So keep an eye out for that. Katie and Kelly do great work and would love for you guys to be able to get more information on each of these. What I'd say about these markets, Juneau's an interesting one in that we've actually got 2 Alaska markets in the top 10 for underserved now. And it makes sense. It's very far. And when you think about that use case of exploring or traveling, you're more likely to want to try before you buy if you're going to be moving there or take an extended assignment. Another thing I'd like to emphasize for people here is like, how do you as landlords access this data? And as a reminder, we do power a stats page, Furnished Finder /stats. It's free for all of you. And it is something we want to invest and basically improve on. So I'll acknowledge it's got some shortcomings. Where I think it is most powerful is places that are more rural or smaller markets like this. And so you think about Abilene as a use case. The stats page shows you all the demand within 10 miles of the center of Abilene, which in Abilene is basically only Abilene. There's not a lot else in West Texas in that area. But if you think about Kirkland, Washington, within 10 miles of Kirkland, Washington is a lot of the greater Seattle metroplex. And so it gets more complicated to understand when you're using the stats page for your larger urban environments. And that's something the team has picked up here as a challenge so we can help you get more nuanced information to better manage your businesses. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Abilene again. Didn't see it in the comments. Abilene is where ChatGPT, OpenAI, and Oracle are building the world's largest data center. And so they have thousands of construction workers that are moving here to build the data center. Abilene, while a moderate-sized city, does not have the housing stock and hotel infrastructure to just rapidly turn over and solve that need. And so what we're seeing is that more and more people are turning to Furnished Finder for how do we do this? And we're seeing entrepreneurs, taking an arbitrage lease and furnishing it, finding ways to serve this big, it's going to be a 4 to 6 year surge in demand. And I think data centers is going to be a really interesting strategy for the next 5 to 10 years. There's already a ton of publicity around it. Hopefully each of you are exploring artificial intelligence tools and how to help agents help your lives be easier. But they consume a ton of data, and they typically build them in places that are relatively rural with a relative abundance of power. And so they're frequently not in places that have great housing infrastructure. So Abilene's getting one. There's a large one going in for Meta outside of Monroe, Louisiana. I understand there's one going in outside of Hillsborough, Texas. And you can see these all over the nation. And there's a lot of capital and money behind them. They're willing to pay for good accommodations for these high skill construction workers and technologists. And it's a really interesting strategy, and was grateful to see that it jumped to #1 on our small market list. Okay, next up, the medium-sized markets. So medium markets, think of this as like 500 to 1,000 listings. Top of the list, Portland, Maine. And what was great to see about Portland, Maine here is that the thing that's actually the dominant use case and propelling a lot of the growth is traveling healthcare. And so you'll see for most of these, business has been the top tenant occasion. Seeing traveling healthcare on the top was just good to know that the use case still has a lot of power, and we're still bringing a lot of this demand to landlords. When you look at the rest of the occasions here, Milwaukee has a big downtown revitalization project. And so they're bringing in a lot of workers. And there's also starting to be more and more opportunities in places like Milwaukee to where you can serve that relocation dynamic in addition to the traveling for work dynamic. All right, let's talk about some of the big cities. So by a landslide, the top metropolitan area that's got more demand than supply is Silicon Valley. And so Silicon Valley, between San Francisco and San Jose, collection of Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Redwood City. There's a lot of different towns that go into this. We lumped it all together because they were really similar. And if we had done the small city slide with them not together, 4 of the 5 top small cities, so less than 500 listings, would have been in Silicon Valley. Makes sense that they're on this list and that they have a very high housing prices. There aren't a lot of hotels in the area compared to San Jose and San Francisco, long commute times, and a ton of transitioning knowledge workers and mobility in and out of Silicon Valley for the huge corporate jobs that are there in the startup community. And so, there is a great opportunity here. Obviously, the prices are more expensive as you get into these cities, and in particular, Silicon Valley. But there's also just a phenomenal demand for it and a really unique opportunity to do to run different strategies and to meet a new type of clientele. All right, that takes us through what we were hoping to do with our deep dive on markets. Now we're going to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to as the Furnished Finder team. So before we get into this, and for any team members listening, I mean, we have really been hard at work the last year and a half. We've hired, I think, over 30 technologists. We've really been building out a team that's very familiar with how to build not only marketplace technology, but marketplace marketing, and increasingly how we can help you with better content, better collateral, just help be better partners to you to run your businesses. And so we have hired a ton of people, and we have also had them hard at work helping to improve the product. So, and I want to acknowledge we've got a long way to go. And so the product has gotten better, but we are by no means blind to how many things we can do that catch us up to parity with other platforms. The good news is it's faster to get to parity. And so we'll be rolling things out a lot faster in the coming year than we did in the first year, as we were really focused on fixing the infrastructure and being sure it was stable. So what are some of the big things we've done? Some of the big things we have done, we've launched a better calendar. If you want to take a snapshot of the QR code, or we will put a link to the calendar walkthrough in the comments here. The old calendar was more in the model of Zillow and apartments.com. You basically just put in a date when you were available. It didn't have any functionality to show different blocks, different holds, how long you were going to be available. If somebody's searching for trying to find 3 months versus 1 month, all they knew was you were available. So we launched a calendar that works more like the short-term dynamic, allows you to put in bookings, allows you to put in holds, allows you to import your Vrbo or your Airbnb calendar. And really, my biggest thing to emphasize here is please use it. We need your help using this feature. Of tenants that come to our site and don't successfully find accommodation, the top 2 reasons they don't find accommodation: number 1, because landlords didn't respond to them; number 2, because the calendar wasn't accurate. And the intersection of those 2 is really important too. Most of the time when we talk to landlords that didn't reply, it's because they're booked and didn't realize that they hadn't updated their calendar. And so please go through the calendar walkthrough, pay attention to this, and update your calendars. If your calendar is open, it now auto updates to show that you're available, which is new, but you really do need to stay on top of it. If you take a booking or have a tentative, go in and update it. If you're doing remodeling, you're going to use it yourself, go put the block in there for the future so that we can save tenants time and that we can basically get a great opportunity to put more tenants into your homes. All right, next thing we've been spending a lot of time on, we have been investing in a new listing performance panel. This is meant to help get to a place where you've got more information around how often your listing is being shown to prospective tenants, what your stats are of how long you've been, your calendar's been hidden, your calendar's been live, and how much demand you've been getting. And so what we're seeing is that there's been a lot of engagement with this site, and we've gotten a lot of feedback for how we can improve it. We're going to be adding how we can show how many times your listing's gotten an impression. Think about it as like showed up on the search results page. And we're going to be publishing more about how often you're responding and how many bookings you've gotten so that we can better balance that prior dynamic of being sure we can power tenants with better information of how engaged you are as a landlord. So please get in and review this. There are opportunities to provide feedback on it and help us build a better product so that we can help you get more tenants. Next up, we have redesigned the search page. And so this has been a big driver of the increase in demand. We are now much faster and more modern experience. We can do more experimentation and launch features. One of the next things we're going to be doing here is adding bedroom and bathroom filters. But this has been a huge win for landlords in terms of getting more demand to the landlords. And so we launched this in January and immediately have been seeing results and excited to announce that as of today, it's also live on the iOS app, which is a huge source of traffic. And so we've got that out there. If you are using our services as a tenant at all, really encourage you to go play around with it so you've got a better feel for how this new product works because it's vastly improved. Additionally, we redesigned your property pages last year. So there's a improved photo carousel, larger map. We reoriented things and put more emphasis on the booking request, as I mentioned. We took some emphasis off of the phone reveal. We'd like to get to a place on phone reveal where, in order for people to reveal their phones, we're actually telling you who revealed your phone number. So you've got a chance to do more outreach and more follow up. But this is also helping to lead to more leads for landlords from tenants. Okay, what is around the corner and coming next from us? One thing, this is already live. We've launched a new help center. And so we now are using a modern help center that's got opportunity to search by topics, opportunity to see more of our own content, how to self-serve. And we do still man the phone lines and have a large team of people there to help. But we also want to make it possible for you to self-serve. And so this has been live for just over a week, and we will be improving it and updating it forevermore. And so very excited to have this out in the wild. The next big things we're doing, as I mentioned, app improvements. And so the new iOS app launched today. The majority of the improvements are on the tenant side, but we will be making more improvements to make it easier for landlords to manage their business out of the app and adding more features to that as the year goes on. The next big topic we're going to improve on is messaging and reviews. I saw a few comments come through on the ability to rate a tenant. That will come as part of this process, but we'll basically be providing a modern messaging system so that the context follows you. There's easier to use templates, potential for auto reply, and it'll give us more information on who's active and replying so that we can reward landlords that have the best behavior and are providing the best tenant experiences in terms of availability, reply times, and really helping people to explore the best of all of the incredible 300,000 properties we have. Reviews will be getting an overhaul as well. A lot of that will be built into the same workflow. We do have a gap, and we're well aware that we need to be providing more reviews and offering opportunities for you to help source those in just easier ways. And so the existing workflow is a bit clunky. We get it. We know it needs to get better, and it is on the list for us to be improving as we come out of this year. Lastly, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of just what's happening out in the market. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the reason I'm so excited to be here is that I think this is a very simple, high value add platform for hundreds of thousands of landlords that need an opportunity to basically find tenants at a lower cost. Our big competition are these mega platforms like Airbnb, and on the long-term side, like Apartments or Zillow. Airbnb has made a lot of recent changes, and so encourage you to check out their terms and conditions. I don't think any of it is really revolutionary so much as it's a signal that they're going to be more and more serious about owning customer data and really monetizing every aspect of the experience. And so the images here around terms and condition changes, around how they, being sure you don't remarket to guests, being sure you don't exchange information before the booking, being sure you don't encourage repeat behavior offline, and really some interesting changes to how they think about access devices and whether you can collect emails and other parts of the experience. They've also, as of last week, announced that they have the new emphasis on powering services and basically building out new marketplaces to help service providers sell services out of your home. It is entirely opt out for landlords. So if you are on Airbnb, I encourage you to be sure you're comfortable with it and check whether you want to be doing that. our big reason for being vis-a-vis Airbnb, one, it's a lot cheaper and no service fees, but two, it just gives you the control. And so we're giving you the control to figure out your policies and figure out who you want to stay there and not have us in the middle of it and basically telling you how to run your business the way that those platforms have evolved. So please stay up to date on those if you're their customers and be sure that you're running the business the way you want to run your business. Next up, I get a lot of questions around the macro economy and what's happening for monthly rentals. What I would say is I think that you're in a great business. I think that the macro trends that support monthly furnished rentals, likely increasing cost of furniture in terms of harder for people to furnish their own places, but also like there's an affordability crisis that will not be solved for housing for a very long time. They have to bring hundreds of thousands of homes online, likely millions at the national scale, and it's just going to take more like a decade than a few years. What we're starting to see, we think in some cases, almost a Europification of the way people start to live, and that they are living a bit more in these monthly rentals and certainly choosing them over apartments. And so what I expect to see in the next 3 to 5 years is that this is a category that's winning, that people are choosing to, take home more of their own paycheck, avoid paying fees, and travel for work, travel for their relocation in Furnished Finders. And by working directly with you, that's how they're going to be able to do this. The other big change that's happening that's not mentioned here is regulatory. Most major metropolitan areas at this point have a 30-day or less either restrictive licensing policy or a 30-day or less outright ban on vacation rentals. And so if you've been in one of those situations, you may want to think about, you may not have to sell, you may be able to pivot into a midterm strategy. Or if there's a night cap on how many nights you can go, then maybe you can do a hybrid strategy, which is quite popular, where you run it as a midterm for certain seasons, and maybe for peak tourist season or festival, it's still a short term if the law allows. But overwhelmingly, 30-day rentals are still protected by law just about everywhere. I think Hawaii is the only state I'm aware of that has any restrictions against it. You see occasionally homeowners associations will have a restriction, but in general, you're in a very clean area. And I think there's a lot of macroeconomic enthusiasm for the business you've chosen and opportunity you are in. So lastly, for those of you who aren't customers yet or are interested in adding more inventory, we do have a coupon code to offer. And so Playbook20 will help you get $20 off your next property. And am enthusiastic that some of you will hope to add some additional inventory and help us close that gap between how fast tenants are growing and how fast supply is growing, because we could use more supply to help more tenants. With that, glad to see Katie back on and my opportunity to take a drink of water, and then we'll take a ton of Q&A.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. This is like one of the most engaged chats and audiences that we have ever had on a Furnished Finder webinar. So really, really appreciate it. First things, I just want to encourage everybody who's putting ideas into the chat. We hear you. I will personally make sure that all of these ideas make it to our product team and get documented. Jeff will attest to, we are working hard every single day to make this platform everything we know it can be, and we're making some really great progress. So I just want to encourage everybody who has put ideas here, like, we hear you, and I will make sure that they get to the right people. I'm going to go through as many questions as I can with Jeff in the next, what do we have, 21 minutes? So Jeff, something that I'm hearing kind of recurring in the chat is, what about tenants who don't reply? What should I do? How should I handle that? How do I, we talk about landlords not replying sometimes, but what about if a tenant doesn't reply?
Yeah, it's a, there's this notion of network effects, and in some cases, how they help grow each other, but they also feed off some bad behavior. And so what we're seeing happen is that since tenants aren't getting replies from landlords, they're sending more booking requests. And, they're starting, maybe they used to send 2, now they're sending 3, or they used to send 2, now they're sending 4. And so there's 2 different occasions. One, if you reply and they don't reply, I feel for you. I very much hope that they all reply, but keep in mind that, they probably have already found the housing they were looking for. Whereas on the flip side, there's someone who's interested in your house and being able to support them on that and get back to them quickly is a huge value add. What we will do with this new messaging platform is build in more automation and templates and opportunities for you to auto reply if you're booked, and also for them to say something like, hey, I've booked, so now I can please notify everyone else I reached out that I've, my use case is solved. I don't need help anymore. This has been primarily an issue with housing requests. Housing requests are not part of the property details page. They're that one-to-many dynamic that's quite unique. And so when you see things on your dashboard that say things like unmatched housing leads, that's the biggest tip. Like, I wouldn't expect them to get back to you. They're going to get back to the person that best meets them, because frequently they'll get 300 replies. And it's kind of an unfair burden to expect the tenant to write back to 299 landlords that weren't a fit if they've already found the perfect fit for themselves. So know that there is some distinction, and there is a, Katie, maybe we put the link to I think it was a webinar we did on the different types of tenant requests and how to think about them, just to be sure everyone understands how to navigate that part of the dashboard.
Yep, we have recently been putting a lot of effort into our YouTube channel as well. So if you guys can go on YouTube, what Jeff's referring to is it's within one of our YouTube walkthroughs that goes through every tenant type to make sure that if you're not hearing back from someone, it's different if it's a really well matched lead or if it's just kind of a hopeful lead, right? An unmatched lead, as we call it. So, all right, I'm going to pick another theme here. And Jeff, can you speak to what we do as Furnished Finder to spread awareness about our website, our platform, how we get tenants and travelers, and when a landlord pays the $179 per year to list their property, what are we doing on their behalf to bring traffic to their listing and hopefully really get them
Yep.
then tenant?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, we've got some similarities to being like a co-op. Each of you are paying us a fee for us to go market on your behalf and find tenants. And so there's a handful of things we do. I'll talk through maybe 5 of them. One of the things we do the most of is we have a lot of experts in what I call platform marketing. And so how we go market on your behalf on the large tech platforms. That mainly means Google and Meta. And so we're very active on in Google search advertising. We're very active in improving our SEO so we can stand on your behalf. We're very active in Meta and how we build lookalike audiences and help find tenants on your behalf. The additional thing we're doing, we're starting to run more and more video. And so we have a platform that now allows us to advertise, think about it as like the Hulus and the Amazons and the Netflixes, and also a lot of display ads that might be on your local news sources. And so we're running more and more of that type of activity to drive awareness. We have a third pillar. We're doing a lot more in the PR space. And so we're in the process of hiring an agency and kind of being sure people realize, the stat I always like to use: if a traveling nurse makes $100,000 a year and takes 3 contracts a year, she'll take home almost a week and a half of take-home pay by booking on Furnished Finder instead of Airbnb. That's money that you and the nurse get to split. She gets to keep in her pocket. It's a great public interest story. And then lastly, we have millions of people that have booked housing on our site. And so we're constantly re-engaging them and working with them to do more of that. We hope in the next year to have more to say about what I'd call B2B. And so working with the larger placement agents, corporate agents, insurance relocation specialists to build tools that make it easier for them to find your homes on our site. They're using the site today. We're just not doing enough to make it easy for them to use it better as power users.
Okay, next theme I'm seeing is what can a landlord do to increase the visibility of their listing on our search results page?
I think the things that we're looking at are basically, we're looking at how often does somebody click from the search page to open your property details page. So think about what's on that page. Mainly it's a picture and a price. And so depending on whether you're on the map or whether you're in the list, picture, price, headline, there's a handful of amenities, but really obsess on what those things are and experiment. Change your hero image, change your headline. And, if it's your first time trying to get a booking, you might really change your price and think about what it takes to get that first booking. And so we're looking at how often somebody goes from the search result to load a property details page, which is really that limited set of information. And then we're looking at, once they're on the page, how often do they submit a booking request, submit a message, or reveal the phone number? And those are more indicative of the holistic quality of that entire listing page that you put together. And so do take the time to have professional photographs. Do take the time to really think through your pricing strategy. I encourage everyone to look at, the prices on our site, the prices on Airbnb, and what are the prices of a comparable or substitute hotel. And if you feel like you've got a good product at a price that's better than all of those, you should be able to succeed on our platform. It should, and so that's probably the biggest, the most structured advice I can give is really treat it like a tenant. And then in the scenario where nobody's clicking, then I would play with price a little bit for that first action.
All right, speaking of price, we have some landlords here who have noticed the price of a Furnished Finder subscription has increased over the past couple of years. So let's talk about that a little bit, why it's gone up and the value that we've been able to bring with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when the price of the listing had been $99 from company inception, which was I think late 2013, until the end of, and basically until the beginning of 2024. The price is now $179. It won't keep going up at that same rate, but the price of the service, likely will keep going up at some moderate rate, so we can keep advertising on your behalf and keep hiring people to improve the platform. My perspective on it, $179 for the year is that, the average landlord who's getting bookings on our site is making more than $12,000. This is less than 1% of the income you get. On the flip side, Airbnb is charging typically 10 plus 3. If you're doing something where you're using a placement agent, it would often be, either a month's rent or that you're going to be charging, a call it 20 to 25% placement fee for the shorter term. And so we think we're price disruptive and cheap, and a great value as such. Now, where we go with pricing in the future, I would rather be adding a lot more homes and selling a lot more services than taking our price up. And I hope we can get to a place where the product is working in a manner to where we can do that on behalf of each of you.
All right, someone mentioned that they want to be able to use the stats page with zip codes. Let's
Yep.
talk about kind of when to expect that, as well as just little quirky upgrades along the way, kind of similar to that zip code one.
Yeah. So I think the right way to think about the dynamic is think about when you're going to be able to search the search experience by zip code or by school district or within a 5-minute commute of a hospital or a major commuter corridor. We're fixing it for the tenants first. And so there's a lot of emphasis on how we get this right for the tenants. And that gives us more data to help you understand what people are searching for and where they really want to be. And so that's priority one. Now, as I mentioned earlier, like the stats page has a lot of valuable and accurate information, but it is not the experience I would like it to be. And so we are investing in, whether we don't have a product treatment yet. And so because we don't have a product treatment, we don't have a timeline. I think by zip code is a pretty reasonable thing we might do. A product treatment that I like from Verbo is that you build a comp set. And so potentially you say, I want to look at, these 10 listings. Think of like building a comparison cart on Amazon or something. And then it shows you indications of what those 10 listings do, from a stats perspective. And so we're looking at different treatments. What it has to do is be a much smaller opportunity on geographic radius, whether that's just showing Austin instead of Austin plus 10 miles. It has to be more nuanced. And we need to be able to show things like what types of tenants are coming. Currently we just kind of say how many people are coming, and also be able to give you more drill down on what I really need to see is, 78703 zip code listings for 2 bedrooms or more. And so we understand the use case and are going to build that. We've just got to be sure we've got the data available and a product treatment that does this well for you. I hope that this is something that we get out, before the end of the year, because there is a lot of demand for it and we know we can improve the experience, but we've got to build it and we haven't built it yet.
All right, let's talk about some healthcare trends. We have Mary on here who said that she has a nurse who had her contract terminated halfway through, And she's just wondering if these are trends we're seeing within the healthcare industry, of more and more contracts getting canceled, or kind of, I think any insights we can give into what we're seeing for healthcare trends would be valuable.
Um, I mean, the first thing I'd say is that for a long time, the healthcare trends were down and to the right. They were negative. The category was contracting coming out of COVID, and we've seen it stabilize. And most industry forecasts, I think, are for it to be growing, ish 5 to 10% this year. We are seeing healthcare start growing again. I don't know anything about contract cancellations, so I can't speak specifically to that. What I can speak to is that the number of tenants per healthcare request has increased year on year. And so I think there is more pressure on stipends. And so you are seeing more traveling nurses choose to basically split a place together or try and get, roommates for a 2 bedroom or a 3 bedroom because that's how they can get the stipend math to work more. So I do think there's some pressure on the budgets. And if you've had, stable rent on healthcare, my guess is that there's been some downward pressure the past few years, and that's probably continued into this year.
All right, fantastic. I have a fair amount of questions here just about like specifics about how to run your rental. If you should have co-ed tenants for room shares, if you should have utility caps, are exterior cameras okay? Are interior cameras okay in common spaces? Let's have you speak to just kind of the control that Furnished Finder gives you, A, to run your business how you want to run it, and then B, some resources, best practices, where someone could go to kind of get some help in answering these specific, little nuances.
Yeah, I mean, it is. There's nothing I can helpfully say at a national level about like it's this type of unit or this destination. We talked about the tenant types, and I think you can draw some conclusions from that. I think from a strategy perspective, we're seeing more growth in whole home than we are in private room. And so, I think there's more and more use case where whole home is probably, certainly the preferred strategy. I wouldn't say it's the dominant strategy. What you want to do with it really depends a lot on what your personal desire for the inventory is. Like, are you going to be living there? Is it an ADU? What are the considerations around, what type of tenant you want or how you want to be thinking about trade-offs between cash flow consistency and profit optimization? My advice to people is to really go deeper on a lot of the work that Katie and Kelly have done on landlord diaries. You can search that on podcasts or on Spotify for different topics that interest you, and to be sure you've joined our Facebook group. And so there is a 150,000 member large Facebook group that's really focused on helping landlords answer questions. We have a lot of content on these topics, but I do think oftentimes the nuances are so local in nature that you really have to get pretty hyper local in order to get an answer for yourself. Katie, as our resident landlord expert, what would you add on the topic?
I mean, I think that's perfect. I think also what's great about Furnished Finder is you can find another property that's in your area that's comparable, and you can reach out to that landlord and you can create a relationship. I have relationships with other landlords in the markets that I'm in, and we even use it. Oh, hey, I have a tenant who's extending, but I can't accommodate their extension. Can you handle them? Right? Can you house them? So these relationships and midterms are really, really valuable, and people are very open to discussing kind of best practices, what works with them. So um, yeah, I think those resources that we have are fantastic. All right, Jeff, what would you recommend to someone who is not getting the leads that they want? Maybe either in the details don't match up enough or the quantity, like they just are looking for some more traffic.
Yeah, I think this is the same point of the search conversation earlier. How do I get more people through from search? And I think that there's really not that many things you can play with. Be sure you're responding, be sure the calendar's accurate, but it's really about your best photo, your headline, the amenities listed, and the price point. And there are places where I'd say in general right now we've got more demand for supply, but that doesn't mean it's a perfect fit everywhere. And a lot of what we're working on is how can we go identify where there might be hyper-local examples or different places where we need to invest in more tenant demand to help either a use case or, I think what's more frequent is that there are pockets where there might be more people searching for large format and we have small format, or more people searching for small format and we have large format. And so we've got work to do on matching, but really the biggest things you control are photo, price, and headline, and play around with it. Really experiment. We don't penalize you for changing it, and until you change it and find something that works, then that's the best advice we can give.
All right. How about, can I see how many prospects have clicked or viewed on our listings? Let's talk about the new listing performance panel real quick and how that came about and how landlords can use it.
Yeah, so it does show how many people have viewed your listing. And so PDP views is a new metric where you can see that. It also shows how many people have taken an action on your listing. The next thing we'll be adding is what we call search impressions. And so that's above a view is how many times you showed up on search results. And we have been tracking that for several months now. We need to get enough basically statistically significant data to make it available to each of you. So you can start to see your own funnel for your listing of, okay, how many times did it have a chance to get clicked? How many times did it get clicked? How many times did people take an action? And then as we get more data there, we'll be able to publish, basically playbooks and advice for each of you to know, like, okay, if this is happening, what can you do differently? And we'll be hard at work on that.
Okay, let's talk about, Randy mentioned that I see I'm also listed on Travel Nurse Housing. What is the relationship and how do I leverage that?
Travel Nurse Housing is a wholly owned subsidiary. It is a website that was focused on travel nurse housing and really had a tremendous surge in popularity during the pandemic. There is nothing you need to do differently to be on it. It's entirely the same data source from a dashboard perspective as what you already manage in Furnished Finder. Messages work the same, and so no change needed. We just advertise there to try and help you find more travel nurses.
Okay, I think we have hit the majority of the questions, at least the themes of the questions that we've gotten behind. The only really remaining one that I see is a lot of our landlords are expressing a desire to have tenants fill out their traveler profile more
Yes,
completely and thoroughly. So I think that's something that,
it's
we
a
can take
we
internally. It would be
are
great to have everybody fill that out.
we will. If any of you haven't, I'd encourage you to go check out the tenant profile, and you might get a better understanding as to why they don't fill it out completely. It's an overwhelming amount of things we're asking them. In particular, all of their certifications and licenses. It's very geared to travel nurses, and so I don't think it's applicable to what is now 75% of our tenant audience. And so we will rebuild it. And when we rebuild it, we will make it, it'll have more similarity to that short-term rental paradigm from Airbnb, where you can get just a quick snapshot of who they are. One of the things we're excited to explore is, can we provide more social cues or links like somebody's LinkedIn profile, or can we add things to it that help enrich it so it's not them having to fill out the same thing again and again and again? And I think we'll be able to do something there.
Okay, and you guys, I still see your ideas coming in. These are all fantastic. Um, the team here at Furnished Finder is right in line with a lot of these ideas. So maybe Jeff, just kind of, I think as a note of departure, let's just talk about how are we picking what we're tackling first, and
Yep.
kind of the order of operations and the confidence that landlords can have with what we're doing here. And I think we can close out.
Yeah. So, I'm actually talking to a customer in a few minutes who had reached out about how come it's not faster. Um, and so the thing we first had to fix was all of the underlying infrastructure, data structure, and how you build software on top of a technical layer. So we've now built the technical layer and have started building the software on top. The way we're prioritizing, and it's a little bit art and a little bit science, but the emphasis is on where do we have the most canvas to paint on. And so we started with homepage, search page, property details page, because that's where we do all of our hardest work for you, is getting more tenants to you. So we started on those pages. Then we went to the app. The next thing will be messaging, as I mentioned, But then we're going to get more and more into tools and how you manage your listing, manage your workflow, and manage that landlord experience. And so that'll be kind of probably where most of next year emphasis and the end of next year is, making it easier for photos, adding, AI tools to help with descriptions, adding a lot to basically just make it easier. It is not an intuitive, easy product experience for landlords, and I acknowledge it. And so we will fix it, but we're trying to tackle things to where, since we are still a small team, every ounce of energy gets the biggest payback for you possible. And so most of that emphasis has been on, how do we find you more tenants? And now that we're finding more and more tenants, it's going to be, how do we make it easier for you? And I hope to do both in great spades, for the next month and for the years after that.
Sorry, my mouse decided to glitch out for a second there. It did not want to hit unmute. Well, I think we are at time, everybody. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for being such an active and engaged audience. We are listening. We hear you all so much. And we are working so hard to make this, as incredible as it can be, and also make it a huge value that you have today. So like I mentioned at the beginning, this recording will be automatically sent to the email that you registered with. So keep an eye on for that. Make sure you join that Facebook group if you're looking for additional resources. The podcast is called The Landlord Diaries. And our YouTube channel for Furnished Finder also has some amazing resources. So thank you all again. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.